not only has time been affected by cinema and by media, but our spatial reality has too. Some of these are technological inventions, like, for example, the invention of the zoom lens, which really began in the early 2 decades of the century, didn't become popularly used until the 50s. In fact, the section I'm going to show you from Vertigo was a really interesting use of the zoom lens. What happened was a lot of, when the zoom lens first came out, it was used excessively. I mean, people were zooming in and out, like, Sergio Leone's films, How the West, what is it, Once Upon a Time in the West. It's like zooming into the close-up of the guy and zooming out from the horse and all that kind of stuff. And, of course, laugh-in on television, when they got the zoom lens attached to a TV camera, you'd wish they hadn't. One of the interesting effects that I kind of discovered, it's something that other people had discovered too, but I found out about it, again, riding on the front of a CTA train, riding down the track, like sort of dollying in on the scene and zooming out, produced an incredibly ambiguous visual phenomenon, in that zooming out made the background recede away from you, and dollying in on the train, moving forward on the train, had objects going past you. So the middle ground was actually being forced. One half was going away from you with the zoom effect. The other half was moving towards you with the dolly effect. And the first place that I think it was really used was in Vertigo, and was developed by the guy who was the special effects cameraman on it. I'm going to run a little piece of the Hitchcock thing. There's a little bit of a thing to begin with, but they built this elaborate model for like what results in being less than 10 seconds of screen time, but it's amazing psychological effect.
The much-imitated vertigo effect was achieved by a combination of zooming forward and tracking backward simultaneously. After much trial and error, filming on a full-size set proved impossible, so they used a large-scale model of a staircase. Turned on its side, it was filmed by special effects cameraman John Fulton to make the audience feel as dizzy as Jimmy Stewart.
Actually, the narrator is technically incorrect. They're not zooming in, they're zooming out, which is the reason the background is moving away from you. What they're doing is they're dollying in. If you notice, there's one more shot of this, which I'll show you. This part of the frame stays almost constant, which means as the camera is moving forward, the lens is widening out to keep this thing almost constant. But you can see this is staying constant. The middle ground is part of it's coming towards you, part of it's going away, and it creates that sort of stomach churning effect, which is symbolic, has now become symbolic of Vertigo. It's been used in a couple of other movies. It's kind of become a cliche like a lot of other effects. It was used in Jaws, it was used in Godfather, a couple other places. But it's not used very often anymore, fortunately, because it can be overused too. But this is the background moving away, foreground staying pretty much the same, and the middle ground being stretched like taffy. This is my thing. Notice the workers split away from each other. They get closer, they go farther away because they're in the middle ground. I used that in a documentary about graffiti artists where I was walking forward and zooming out so the mural kind of stretches like a piece of plastic or something. Another example of how a technical development can alter our perception of the old space-time continuum is the development of the bullet time sequence, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. It was used probably the first time popularly, it was used in a couple of commercials, but it really kind of became known for in the first film of The Matrix, when Keanu Reeves falls backwards. When they first discovered this guy has sort of almost supernatural powers, this guy's firing bullets at him, and he drops back, and the bullets are flying past him. What happens is it's like a slow motion backfall, and the camera appears to be moving around him in slow motion. It is a very complicated technical achievement, which prior to the computer was not even feasible. I mean, it might have been feasible, but it would have been almost impossible. There's a little clip from the Matrix that will show you a little bit about how the array of cameras is set up around the character. If this thing's going to advance, there we go.
Help!
Enter the Gata. The Gata Force.
Do one more. Let's get the wind cue right. Yeah. Nobody's around.
Politically around.
He's around. So you might want to spin around and face the subject at hand. In this particular rig, there are 120 cameras and 2 motion picture cameras set up. Bullet time is something that was conceived for The Matrix specifically. But I think it's the byproduct of the directors observing technology, and then they ask the right question at the right time.
The concept, in a way, goes back to the very earliest beginnings of motion picture photography itself. Ed Weird, the guy's name Ed Weird, Maybridge, had a bet with the governor of California that a horse at full gallop, that all 4 feet would leave the ground at the same time. And he set up an array of cameras, not unlike the Matrix, that the horse running through the scene would trip these wires, how they got the horse not to be spooked with these wires and such. But he basically went through this whole move and won his bet, because at a certain point, the horse, all 4 legs were off the ground. Now, even Maybridge didn't necessarily develop this in motion picture, but they think that Edison saw these pictures and kind of got the idea of, running a strip of film through the camera, and in a sense, that's how motion picture photography developed. In a way, I find it going back to like Duchamp and the Cubists. Even all technical developments require kind of a I don't know what you would call a cultural, metaphysical soup in which to emerge. And the Cubists said basically any object in space could be viewed and should be viewed from an infinite number of vantage points. That's the idea of Cubism, that they have these different points. And in a similar way, Blake talking about the idea of being able to see eternity, that any moment of time contains all of time. So in some ways, these very abstract ideas kind of have found their fulfillment in certain technical achievements. And I think this will continue to happen. I mean, as I said before, I think we're at the very beginning of this kind of technological media revolution. I mean, things coming up are going to be quite amazing.